Hello, everybody. This is my first time trying to do this on Zoom. I usually, I love coming to our Sangha. It's probably my favorite space to teach. And so this is a new experiment, doing it on Zoom. And one thing that I wanted to mention, because I've been teaching with other groups on Zoom, is that to see if we can pay attention to our own experience as we go through our time together, but also see if you can feel into the field that we are creating together. And particularly when there are teachings that have to do with the depth of what we are, with our true nature, that essence that we all share is beyond time and space. So when we come together with this kind of intention, there's a field that's generated that we can actually palpate, like we can really feel that. And so it also, I find, helps give us faith that this is actually so, that we actually have that, and that it is real. So I just want you to, we're just getting started, so it hasn't coalesced yet, but I wanted to bring it up at the beginning so that you can track your own experience, what you're going through, and then feel into the whole field. So I want to first express my gratitude, for all of you, for your practice, for EBMC and everyone that keeps our center going. Gratitude for the fact that we have shelter, that we have enough to eat and have enough to support us, that we can actually come and be together for these teachings. Gratitude for the earth that provides all that we need for a life, and that in fact is really the ground that we come from and that sustains our whole existence. And gratitude for the original people of this land that knew how to live in balance, and that are the source of knowledge that we need these days in order to find our way back to knowing how to live in harmony again. So gratitude for all of that, and for Julio and Antoinette for your support tonight. So with the meditation, I wanted to just keep track of the time. Yeah, we're right on time. Part of why we suffer is that we have this perceptual distortion that we feel ourselves as sort of a separate unit that just kind of floats on top of the earth. And we don't realize that we are absolutely inextricably connected to the earth, to all of life, to each other, and that it's just the reality of how it is. But most human beings, we live with the experience of being this sort of unit that's extracted and separate. And so with the meditation, what I wanted to try to do is to see if we can literally through the body feel our connection again. And so I had put in the chat some information about, let me just get rid of the information about Jyutsu. Jyutsu, it's the ancient Japanese system, and it has a lot of self-help techniques, and the hands are like jumper cables. They help rebalance the energy in the body. And so at this time, it's just invaluable, because as the energy gets rebalanced, not only does the body feel better, but the mind state improves. So when we get anxious, the energy is supposed to come up the back and down the front. When we get anxious, it reverses and it goes up the front and down the back. So I'm going to show you just a very simple, and I'm going to go through it very fast, but I would like you to experiment with this. It's called the main central on your own, and you can take as long as you need to do it. So I'm going to move the screen a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So the right hand goes on top of the head and rests there. It's going to stay there until the very end. With the left fingertips, we're going to be going to a few different points in the front of the body. So we start with between the eyebrows. And when you do it at ease, I would recommend that you count to at least 30 for each spot, and you could count to 60 and do a minute each spot. So it depends. Sometimes you'll feel like a pulse as the energy connects. So between the eyebrows is the first place. At the tip of the nose, the second place. And then the dip in your throat, that dip there. And then the center of your chest over your breastbone. And then the solar plexus is where, the ribs are like on a curve where they come in the middle. That's the solar plexus there. Kind of the soft part right below the ribs in the middle, like where the stomach is to the left a little bit there, but it's right there. That's an important spot. And then you move down to the top of your pubic bone. The energy, as it comes down the front, it dives right above the pubic bone. It dives behind it, goes through the bottom of the body, and then comes up the back. So when you have your right hand on top of your head, your left hand on top of the pubic bone. So you wait here, and you want to make sure that you can feel either like a pulse or like you have a good connection. And when you have a really good connection, then you can take your right hand and use the back of your hand, because the palm is going to be too hard. So use the back of your palm of your, use the back of your hand and slide it behind you over your sacrum, which is the very bottom of your spine. So the fingers are pointing down. And what happens is the left hand sends the energy down and the right hand brings it up. So this last point, sometimes if you don't have time and you're in bed and you can't sleep and you're just anxious, sometimes you can just do this last point, with the left hand over the top of the pubic bone and the right hand covering the whole sacrum. And this really lines up the midline of the body and helps us come into balance. I don't know if you can feel a little, we've gone through it quite fast, but I just wanted to show you, and then you can do it more slowly on your own. So for the meditation, tuning into the body first. And if you could become aware of your bones. The bones have mineral in them. And they're also the site of our bodies that is responding to gravity from the earth. So as you tune into your bones, if you find it helpful at the beginning, you could use your hands, and you could either do it on your head, you know, and you can use the sound M, like use your upper arms. And perhaps the long bones in your thighs, tune into them with your hands over your thighs. So I'm just going to do a few more M's, and you keep your hands wherever is most helpful to you, and let the bones, the mineral of your bones, connect to the minerals of the earth. And after a little while, you let go of the sound and just be open to registering what happens when you make that connection. And then let yourself sit for the remainder of our time. I want to acknowledge so many wonderful friends that I haven't seen in a while. It's just so beautiful to see you. And welcome to the new people I have yet to meet. I was thinking about how at this time, with all that's going on, most of us are a bit discombobulated, and I realized I didn't even do the refuges, so I'm going to do them now. So I do 4 refuges. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. And so this 4th refuge, the Great Mother, is the state of understanding through which Buddhas become Buddhas. And there's also another line that we often use, which is inclining the heart so that all our practice, everything we do, is not just for ourselves, but is for the whole thing. And not only other human beings or even other living beings, but everything, the minerals, the plant, everything. So then the bodhicitta is for the sake of everything that is arising. May I reach complete understanding. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. So the theme that I wanted to explore a little bit and leave plenty of time for your own exploration was, how do we stay connected to our ground, you know? To begin with, most of us, have some degree of disconnection from our source. And under stress, the energy kind of comes up in the body, and we further disconnect from the body, from the earth, from our essence. And it was interesting that different people were teaching around the same thing. Dzogchen Rinpoche, who's a very well-known Tibetan Lama, was teaching recently just about this, and he called it touching ground. And what he was working with was the mudra, the Shakyamuni Buddha. In the moment of his enlightenment, what he chose to do was to extend his right hand and his fingertips and touch the earth. And so at the most sort of superficial level, we describe that as, asking the earth, to be the witness to his own awakening. And I myself, for a long time, just thought, there's a lot more to that mudra, to that movement than just asking the earth, And especially because we don't understand that every molecule of this body comes from the earth. We continue to be part of the earth through our whole lives, and then eventually, our bodies decompose and go back to the earth. So the entire cycle of a life, we're part of the earth. So when the Buddha extended his hand like that, Dzogchen Rinpoche says, that mudra is so significant. And it was acknowledging the earth, and that Buddhas throughout times have come to the earth, they've all come to this earth. And so it's like the continuity of the awakening process that's happened within the planet itself, with the planet. And so also the hand signifies a connection to the truth, the absolute truth. It's like taking a stand to connect with the truth. It's also a mudra that it's like the bottom line, that's it. And it has with it a certain humility and simplicity, but at the same time, like a majesty to it, which is, the quality of our own essential nature. And so also then the hand touching the earth is we are also acknowledging our true nature, which is inseparable from the earth. In my teachings, in my lineage, there's a lot of emphasis on space and the space quality of the mind. And for me, it's like that space quality of the mind is a pivotal understanding, because it's the space that is non-conceptual, but is cognizant. And so there's a level of understanding that arises from that is way beyond the discursive mind that's full of labels and words. So, but then the earth, the source of all this life, where all of these bodies come from, the earth as the mother is like, if the space is the mother of awakening and of the mind, the earth is the mother of the embodied experience. And so it's almost like the earth is the mirror of the space in terms of our human existence and our human experience and the whole process of waking up. And so there was another teacher who teaches continuum movement, which is a way of following movement, very subtle movement within the body that is completely outside of what we've been cultured to move, and she was doing a whole training on meeting the fluid ground. So it's like meeting the ground as it moves and expresses itself. So there's our true nature, the way life unfolds, it's an ongoing unfolding, ongoing revelation. And so there's a way to explore that through movement with the body that is unstructured movement. And so she was also using the term meeting the fluid ground. So this concept of the ground, it's really pointing to the fact that even though we experience ourselves as separate beings, We are part of something. We are part of life, an element of life that is beyond what the discursive mind comprehends, describes, entertains. And so at times of difficulty, sometimes, we're kind of pushed. And right now, like part of what's happening is with the fear, with all the threat that we have, the oppression, the injustice, the craziness, the pandemic, the fear of death, the loss of work, the loss of a lot of the, how would I say, the structures that we use to define ourselves by, our sense of who we are, our identity is sort of predicated on our ego structure, is predicated on all these different kind of props, that we hang on to. I mean, just even having to be stuck at home and not being able to see family, that really unglues us, particularly it unglues our personality. And so when we feel unglued, the mind is sort of scrambling, trying to grab onto one certainty or another. And, if you're as anxious as I can be, then I'm always imagining like kind of the worst thing that can happen, and I'm suffering ahead of time. And most of the time it never happens, but I'm suffering anyway. And so the possibility with this practice, I just want to change something here. The possibility with this practice is to see if we can suspend that movement of the mind that wants to define and figure out what's going to happen and start acting from that point, and then hold back and be able to tolerate, be opening to the unknown, opening to the uncertainty, the fact that we don't really know what's going to happen. And the feeling of being unglued, because sometimes we will hang on to a certainty, even if it's a painful projection of what we think is going to happen, just to have some certainty. And then we suffer over that one. So this practice of being able to open and feel the wobble, feel the discomfort of not knowing, and keep opening. One of my teachers used to say, you sort of open and an idea comes to mind, and he would say, turn the page and open, turn the page and open. So we keep opening to see what arises and trying not to hang on to our ideas. But sometimes in that process of opening and opening, then new insight arises that totally surprises us. And it's an insight that's outside of the habitual way that we perceive and try and define everything. So doing this is part of the process of extricating ourselves and finding some freedom when things get really difficult. Because this capacity to open and know what we feel without labeling and judging it is part of what heals and opens new possibilities. So Khyentse Rinpoche was saying, part of this touching our ground, staying connected to our ground, has also to do with befriending ourselves. It's like looking at how, we've introjected so much, either from childhood or from the society or from how we've been treated, that we end up being very hard on ourselves. And, we drive ourselves, and very few of us can be really friendly to our own selves. And so part of the making our way back to reconnecting with that ground is to develop, to suspend the judgment and to be curious about our own experience. And some of the highest teachings in Dzogchen What they say is that we remain in an attitude of allowing. And what is it that we allow? We allow ourselves to register what's actually there in our experience. And it's through that kind of openness that a new process of insight can develop. So in the through that turning inward, it's like part of it is discovering our psychology as we turn in, and we start to see the patterns and why we feel the way we do, and especially if we're not judging and we're allowing things to open up. But the other one is to recognize another aspect of ourselves that is, we may, especially when you're doing the practice of turning the page and open to the space. It's like you're opening, you may find the silence within, the space within, the stillness within. Being with that. And sometimes there's no content, there's no word, there's no thought going by, there's just this openness. That is the beginning of reconnecting to our source, reconnecting to our true nature. And that essential nature is unassailable. That cannot be hurt. And there's a process of insight that happens through that open field of awareness that has no content. That is profound. That's why I wanted you, as we were together, to see if you could feel into the fact that as we're together, there's a presence that pervades the whole field that we're in, that is made up of that quality that's coming from our essence. So some of what we need as human beings in order to be able to relax into that essence, because in order to feel that essence, sometimes we can be shocked, sometimes in extreme circumstances, we can be shocked and feel and know that. But most of the time, the way to be able to access it is there's a process of relaxation, because we're all busy kind of grabbing onto life. If we look at something, our eyes are kind of grabbing the object. To actually relax back and just let the object almost come to us, or be aware of the space between us and an object, it's a process of relaxing back. And it's in that relaxing back that we start to get a feeling for that spacious quality of our nature. So there are certain things, that make it difficult, which, stress and anxiety and worry and all of that. But to the degree that we can begin to connect with it, it can help diminish the stress that we're experiencing. But the other thing is, because we are human beings, we're social beings, and we need each other. Yesterday, I was totally discombobulated. I didn't know how I was going to teach today. I just was out of it. And so I called my sister in Dominican Republic, and I was telling her, I can't now even remember. I think I was talking about how hard it was for us to feel our own pain. Because when we were kids, we were not allowed to feel that. It's sort of like, get yourself together, pull yourself by your bootstrap, And so, it's taken a lot of work to be able to feel painful, like the painful things that are inside. So then just the fact that my sister, oh yeah, we couldn't do that. It was just like, of course, she remembers, she's only a year younger. And just the fact that she remembered that, I felt so understood. And having that understanding, there was like a relaxation that I could just come right back into my essence. And so I'm mentioning this because we all need to be received and understood. When we're received and understood, something in us relaxes. And when that relaxation happens, our essence is that much more available. Somebody asked, now that you're all coming back, I should mention this. Somebody asked the question, with all that's going on for ourselves, how do we keep up with all the stuff, all the grief and the fear and the anxiety and the, even if you just get a couple of people, good friends in the Dharma, and every week get together and do this. And instead of having the particular theme that we use today, you can have the theme of like, what's up now? What's happening for me now? And then when you do the inquiry, there's some skill in doing inquiry. It's not the chatting. It's more like feel your body, and then moment to moment, what's arising. As I'm speaking to you, I'm noticing that I'm getting really excited, and I'm so glad to be here. And like, just, so you just sort of describing like how things are arising for you. And so, and then the person reflects back and does. If you did that with a couple of other people every week, it would be a totally different, your life will be very different. Because we need this. And when we have this, our nervous system relaxes, we can feel our ground, we can feel our essence. And believe me, the wisdom that arises from that essence, it will change your life. How we meet whatever we're facing, that fountain, it allows us to be really appropriate to the circumstances, as opposed to coming from some kind of idea about, I should be doing this or I should be doing. No, when we're in that ground, we see everything that's pertinent, everything that's important, and then we decide what we have to do. So it's, there's a wisdom. That's why it's called, the perfection of wisdom is Dzogchen. The perfection of wisdom, because there's a perspective that arises from that ground that is beyond anything that you can orchestrate from the usual mind. So make little pods of people that do inquiry like that and reflect back. And next time I see you, you report back and tell me what happened. You're describing, a real understanding and direct experience of your essential nature, of timeless, non-conceptual awareness in an embodied fashion in your relationship with the earth, and just keep going. You're on the track, Just keep going, keep letting it open. It has a life of its own. It'll take you, and just don't get caught up in labeling or anything. Just let it take you. You're on it. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, that's the dilemma that many of us are facing right now. And so, there's like all these different techniques that different people are using, but the body piece is key. We have to like be in our bones. I mean, the meditation with the bones and the earth, that's a very powerful, because the bones are the densest part of our body. And if we learn to meditate and place the attention there, it'll start to ground you and make sure it's connected to the earth. Because as Quentin was describing, after a while, you realize there's a seamless part of our anxieties that we feel ourselves like we're floating on top of the earth. We don't realize, that we're part of it. And we're held down by gravity, but still we are part of the earth. We are the part of the earth that's got up and started walking around. Every molecule of this body this is the earth. Where is it? Where else are the molecules going to come from? Outer space? So it's a delusion in our minds. So the earth, you know, as indigenous people speak about the mother, I mean, this is the source of this body. And so our connection with the body and with the earth, and then, you know, depending on our history of trauma, we have to work the trauma very specifically. But the depth of our true nature will make us even more effective in the world and in whatever activity we're doing. It doesn't mean, however, to cultivate that connection, you need to make some space for it. Because if you're busy, busy, busy all the time, we're just living in a habitual fashion. And we're not going to be able to tap into that source. You know, we have to pull ourselves back and make the space so that we can feel the connection. Then you feel the connection, then you start acting, and then you're much more appropriate, you know, and you don't burn out in the same way. But it's a balancing, and it takes years, you know, of fine-tuning that, and depending on the amount of stress at a particular time, you know, it gets harder. I mean, I struggle with it still. I'm going to say just one quote from Nyoshō Ken Rinpoche, which I always say, often bring it up. Profound and tranquil, free from complexity, uncompounded, luminous clarity beyond the mind of conceptual ideas. This is the depth of the mind of the Buddhas. In this, there's nothing to be removed, nor anything to be added. It is simply the immaculate looking naturally at itself. It is simply the immaculate looking naturally at itself. And by the merit generated through our practice, may all beings throughout all the realms of existence come to know their real nature. And may human beings on this planet learn enough humility to be able to come to a new level of understanding. May justice, love, and peace prevail in our world. Thank you. Blessings all around.